All right, let's jump right in. What if I told you that a totally forgotten dinner, way back in 1879, holds the key to changing how you create things today? Seriously, it's this wild story about accidents, well, dirty hands, and finding genius in the middle of a total mess.
So it really all boils down to this one question. I know, it sounds a little weird, right? But stick with me, because the answer, unlocks this incredibly powerful idea for literally anyone who's trying to make something new.
Okay, so you gotta picture this. We're in Baltimore, it's February 1879. A chemist, Constantin Fahlberg, he sits down for dinner. He picks up a bread roll, takes a bite, and it's impossibly sweet, like candy sweet. He's totally confused, so he tries another piece, yep, same thing. And this is where it gets weird. He tastes his napkin, sweet. He tastes his own thumb, and it is just incredibly sweet. And then it clicks. The light bulb goes off. He realizes he forgot to wash his hands after spending all day in the lab working with, of all things, coal tar derivatives.
So that sweet gunk on his hands, it wasn't just some lab spill. Nope, it was saccharin, the world's first artificial sweetener. Think about that. It was a total accident, a discovery that came from a messy, probably pretty gross process. Fahlberg wasn't trying to invent a sweetener. He wasn't even close.
And that story, right there, just perfectly sets up the big idea for us. It's like this quote says, the real breakthroughs, they're not waiting for you in that perfect final version. They're hiding in the mess. They're in the draft you are about to delete, the experiment that went wrong. So what this whole story really highlights is this tension that exists in any creative work, right? It's basically a tug of war between two totally different ways of thinking. We can call them execution mode and, you guessed it, experimentation mode.
And this is where it gets really interesting when you see them side by side. Think about execution mode. That's when your goal is to get it right. Every single attempt feels like a final judgment, you know? It's always asking, is this good enough? And man, that can just paralyze you. But then you've got experimentation mode. And the goal there, it's just to learn something. Every attempt is just another piece of data. The whole question changes from, is this good, to, what if I try this? It's so much more curious, so much more freeing.
Right, so here's the absolute heart of it. Experimentation is all about reframing your work. It's not a performance anymore, it's just collecting data. And when you think that way, all that pressure to nail it on the first try, it just, poof, it disappears. You're not trying to be perfect. You're just a scientist in your own lab, figuring out what works, what doesn't, and this is the best part, what totally surprises you.
Okay, so we can actually take Fahlberg's story, that whole accidental discovery, and build a real, practical framework out of it for our own creative projects. And that's what we're going to call the Saccharin Framework. It's all about how you can turn your own accidents into your biggest assets.
All right, let's break this down. It's a simple 5-step loop. Step 1, experiment freely. This is your get your hands dirty phase. You have to give yourself permission to completely fail. Fahlberg was just messing with chemicals, you're just creating raw material. Step 2, notice the anomalies. This is the sweet roll moment. What's that weird little mistake or surprising turn in your draft that actually feels kind of cool? Step 3, investigate that failure. Fahlberg ran back to the lab to figure out what was going on. You need to look at that scene that didn't quite work and ask, why did it almost work? What was the good part? Step 4, isolate that element. He found the saccharin in the chemical mess. Your job is to find that one golden nugget in a draft that's maybe 90% trash. And finally, step 5, test and refine. You take that one cool element you found and you develop it into something polished and intentional. See? From mess to masterpiece.
Now, I get it. This might sound completely backwards. I mean, from day one, we're all taught failure is bad, avoid it. But if you actually look at the history of creative breakthroughs, it tells a totally different story. It tells us about the power of something called productive failure.
And here's the central paradox, the kind of mind-bending part. When you study your craft, you're learning the rules, right? You're learning what's worked before. But experimentation, that teaches you what only you can do. The true legends, they don't just sit around and wait for a saccharin moment to happen by accident. No way. They build their own labs. They engineer failure. They make messes on purpose, just to see what they can find in the rubble.
I mean, just look at Toni Morrison with Beloved. Do you think she just tripped and fell into a nonlinear narrative? Of course not. She deliberately built that complex, messy structure. She was blending past and present, throwing in magical realism. It was a huge risk. She was running an experiment to see what new kinds of emotional truth she could find in that chaos. It could have been a spectacular failure,
but instead, it became an absolute masterpiece.
Or take Kurt Vonnegut. He didn't just forget how plot works. He took the rulebook for plot structure and just shattered it. With Slaughterhouse-Five, he intentionally made a messy, fragmented timeline because that was the only way to show what trauma and war really feel like. He was making a mess on purpose, and in that mess, he found that voice that is so unmistakably Vonnegut.
And you can't talk about this without mentioning Virginia Woolf, right? Her stream of consciousness style wasn't some happy accident. It was this incredibly daring investigation. She decided to just dive headfirst into the messy, chaotic, unfiltered flow of a person's thoughts. It was a massive experiment to see if you could even put that on a page. And that deliberate dive into the mental mess, it changed literature forever.
So, okay, the proof is there. The greatest breakthroughs come from this stuff. But how do we actually do it? How do we build our own little lab where it's not just okay to fail, but it's encouraged? Let's get really practical here. Here's a few things you could literally start doing today. First, try giving yourself an experiment quota. Like, commit to trying 3 totally new things on whatever you're working on. Or keep what you could call a residue journal. Just a little notebook where you jot down any surprising moments or ideas that stick to you during the day, just like the saccharin on Fahlberg's hand. You could even try writing a deliberately bad first draft, just to rip the pressure of perfection right off. And this one is huge. Separate your time. Have your lab time, where anything goes and there's no judgment. And then have your production time, where you take the good stuff you found and polish it up.
And look, if you take away only one thing, let it be this. All those failed experiments, every deleted paragraph, every messy first draft, that is not wasted time. It is the most essential work you can do. That's your laboratory. That is the place where you stop trying to sound like everyone else and you finally start to discover what you sound like.
So, I'm just going to leave you with this question to chew on. Think about what you're working on right now. You know that one part that's just not clicking? The bit you're tempted to just delete and forget about? What if that's not actually a mistake? What if that's the sweet residue on your hands? What's the mess you're going to go investigate today?